The Premier League has a new rivalry. The greatest to ever do it versus the greatest to never do it. Pep Guardiola, the genius, the visionary, the man who reshaped the league, transformed English football, created a pattern that almost every team in the modern game now tries to adopt. Mr. 4 in a row, the Centurion, one of only 2 treble winners, a legend of the game, the oldest serving manager currently in the league, but standing in his way is new competition. Except this is the one he has to fear the most. Why? It's because this one is himself in a different form. Mikel Arteta, the revolutionary, the one who broke out of the pack and challenged the existing order, the builder. It's been a steady progression, but now Mikel Arteta has created arguably the most complete team in not just English, but European football. But Arteta knows all of this will count for nothing until he's won at least one of what Pep has 7 times now, the league. And that's where we are now, 2 geniuses, 2 friends.
If you had a word to describe your relationship with football, what would it be?
Love.
Love.
2 brothers who once shared the same ideas, the same technical area, the same success, defeats. Now this isn't about healthy competition anymore. This is a question of how badly the other wants it. It's now a full-blown rivalry. This is a story of how 2 friends created the latest rivalry in the Premier League. Pep was always destined to come to English football.
No, I would have liked to maybe to stay 20 years in Barcelona, my home, with these big players. But I am a person, a guy who needs to meet new things. That is the only reason why. So in my career, that will not finish. I hope, hopefully, it will not finish in England.
Even when he was still managing Bayern Munich in 2016, Pep had already talked about the Premier League and how he felt he was going to be in English football at some point in his career. He wanted a new challenge. That challenge became official later on in 2016, when he arrived to leave Bayern Munich and become the new head coach of Manchester City. And that's when things got crazy. Despite all the successes he'd achieved in his career up to that point, his sextuple with Barcelona in 2009, the double in 2011, 3 league titles in a row in charge of Bayern. Despite all of that, even before Pep began his City coaching career, many already believed he was bound to fail.
They told me it's so hard, so tough, and all the people say Pep is not going to adapt in that way. So that's why I'm here, to try to do it.
He'd seen everything. And so, just like that, Pep had his ultimate challenge. The one that excited him the most, to prove to his critics and haters that he could succeed in the hardest and most demanding league in the world. But even with the genius that he is, Pep knew he would need help. He was coming into new territory he wasn't exactly familiar with, and that's when he turned to an old friend, Mikel Arteta. It just made sense. You see guys, Pep and Arteta knew each other back from their Barcelona days and kept in touch. For Arteta, Pep was a role model, but in 2016 they were set to become more. Pep had just become the manager of Manchester City, and his priority signing for his first window wasn't a player, it was a coach. In the same year, Mikel Arteta ended his playing career at Arsenal. He'd retired and was all set to become a coach at Arsenal's academy, but Pep wanted him by his side. He knew just how good Arteta's brain was. He needed that knowledge, a player who wasn't just tactical enough, but had also spent time in the English game, enough to understand it. And it didn't take long for the duo to reach an agreement. Arteta became Pep's new assistant, his right-hand man in the dugout, and in the 3+ years they shared on the same team, the duo became a success. It just made sense. Both were tactically sound enough to understand the game, but the difference was in the small details. Where Pep was a genius at changing systems for formations, Arteta understood the players better. He's the one who saw when a player wasn't doing well. The small details Pep could change to fix a big problem.
Muy bien. Y le dije, amigo, en esta que has fallado, en esta, pero esa no. Y aquí vete que esa hay que meterla.
Claro, los goles que están metiendo Pep no es porque ha mejorado muchísimo una acción individual, sino porque repite mucho más la situación donde él se puede encontrar con el gol. Mete un montón de goles así. Casi toda la primera top, centro del área.
And it worked. They stormed to Premier League success in 2018, the first team in the competition's history since it rebranded in 1992 to hit 100 points in the league. In the following campaign, City did the domestic treble of the Premier League, the Carabao Cup and the FA Cup. But even in the midst of all this success, Pep noticed something about Arteta that made him know the beautiful times wouldn't last forever. Arteta never celebrated against Arsenal.
I remember that when we were together here, when we scored a lot of goals with our opponents, always he jumped and celebrated, except one team. In one team, every time I scored a goal, I jumped, come back, he was sitting there. He was Arsenal. So in that moment, I said, oh, that guy likes Arsenal, you know? And yeah, it's what it is.
It was a club he loved, his home. It was a club he captained and ended his career with. Pep knew a time would come when Arteta might need to leave to focus on his career. It had been playing on his mind, but that thought quickly became reality very soon. The one club Pep knew would turn Arteta's head arrived, Arsenal. Just before we get into this though, if you haven't subscribed to Football Historia yet, it's as simple as hitting that subscribe button to the channel down below. Post Arsene Wenger, the club struggled to find an identity, to create a team. Arsenal wanted a manager who knew the club. Arteta at the time was the ideal candidate. He'd managed the club. More importantly, he was right-hand man to the man changing the league, Pep. And so when Arsenal made the offer, Pep couldn't refuse.
So we work together so good, all staff, Mikel, but he will be the happiest guy in the world if he decides to move because he has this offer, this option. I will not say you don't have to go. So I want the best for my friends, and he's a friend of mine.
This was where everything changed. Even if they never wanted to admit to the other at the time, the relationship was never going to be the same again. Arteta's Arsenal was going to be a step-by-step process. As soon as he arrived, he indicated what his first goal was: to create an identity at the club, to create a team that the fans wanted to see again. It had become common to see Arsenal fans leaving even before games finished, especially at the Emirates. In that low moment at the club, Arteta was the one tasked with carrying the torch and finding a balance again. The early days were fine. You see, they both had different goals. Arteta's task was very different from Pep's. It also meant that Pep didn't need to see him as a rival. Now that was reserved for Liverpool's Jurgen Klopp. While Pep's City continued to dominate and fight for league titles against Liverpool, Arteta was slowly rebuilding Arsenal. The time slowly passed. Pep's team continued growing stronger. The rivalry with Liverpool and Jurgen Klopp hit another high in the 2021-22 campaign, when both teams took the league title fight to the final day for the second time in 3 years. For Arsenal and Arteta, on the other hand, you could see a team wanting to build an identity. Arsenal were more direct in the early years. Arteta didn't exactly pay as much attention to tactics, because his job at the time was about keeping the team stable, finding results. It was hard, especially at the start of the 2020-21 campaign. Just 14 points from the opening 14 matches of the season left Arsenal battling to beat the drop. The contrast between the two managers couldn't have been any bigger at the time. But it also became clear that Arteta only needed a couple of windows to find his team, just like Pep did. The transition happened. In the space of 2 years, he'd gotten rid of players he felt didn't suit his system anymore. Mesut Ozil, Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang, Alexander Lacazette, David Luiz, all these guys left. Arteta's focus now shifted to creating a young team, the future he was prepared to take risks with. He built a core around players like Martin Odegaard, Bukayo Saka, Gabriel, and after initially mixing different formations such as the 3-4-3-1 and the 4-2-3-1, Arteta finally settled. Arteta's Arsenal now had the identity he'd been looking for ever since he arrived, and that's when the media and the world alike took notice. This was going to be war, a friendly and yet so intriguing war. Why? The two ideas were so similar and yet so different. Enter the 2022-23 campaign. Arteta had steadied the ship. He took Arsenal from that horrible run at the end of 2020 to just missing out on Champions League qualification on the final day of the 2021-22 season. Pep City entered that season as the defending league champions. Each had also made big additions, the sign that it wasn't going to be an ordinary season. Pep City finally solved a problem up top, signed Erling Haaland and Julian Alvarez to get actual strikers in the team. Arteta, on the other hand, noticed the key areas his squad needed strengthening. What did he do? Take from Pep. He signed both Gabriel Jesus and Alexander Zinchenko from Man City. Except these weren't just Man City offloads to Arteta. He wanted to add players who knew how to win to the team. More importantly, he brought back William Saliba from a loan spell into the first team. Now he had a backline, now he had a spine in midfield and a system in attack. It only took a few weeks into the new season to understand the new reality. Jurgen Klopp's Liverpool struggled for form in the early weeks. For the first time in the Premier League, we were witnessing a master versus apprentice story. It's important to stop and process everything that's happened up to this point. Arteta had come into his own. Pep Guardiola's Man City continued to produce results. Erling Haaland was banging goals. Arsenal continued to find ways to win, and when the two finally did get to face each other, you could tell they knew a storm was coming that would test their friendship. Arsenal's Arteta suddenly weren't easy pushovers anymore. Even when they lost to City, it was down to narrow results, mistakes. They'd forced Pep to rethink his tactics. This 3-1 defeat didn't tell the full story. Arteta's men forced City into uncomfortable positions. De Bruyne gave City the lead. Saka drew Arsenal level from the spot. It was only down to a Gabriel mistake that City went ahead before Haaland sealed the win. Even with that 3-1 win at the Emirates, Guardiola had taken notes. He gave Arteta a proper beating at the Etihad months later, 4-1. But even with that, it didn't knock down the Arsenal. With less than 10 games to play, there was still a title race. Arsenal held the advantage at this point. They only needed 26 points from a final 30 to become league champions. But in the space of weeks, 2 2-all draws to both Liverpool and West Ham, followed by a 3-all draw to Southampton, and that damaging defeat to City at the Etihad meant Arteta's men had lost their advantage. The experience Guardiola and his team had eventually paid off. But it was again another warning shot. City went on to win the league and the treble, but Arteta had gotten even stronger. In that summer that followed, he was now able to match Pep. Arsenal beat City to the signing of West Ham midfielder Declan Rice. Set-piece coach Nicolas Jova had now been confirmed at the club from Man City. Kai Havertz arrived to give Arsenal a new wave in attack. It's not like Pep didn't know Arteta would get better. The truth is, if anything, he almost underestimated him, and it only took a first meeting in the new campaign for Pep to really understand what Arteta had fully become. A desperate man, the kind that had to be feared. That was immediately the first difference between the two, where Pep was willing to die with his tactics until they became obsolete or put in a few changes. Arteta didn't mind changing the plot at all costs just to win. It worked. Arsenal versus Manchester City in the first meeting of the 2023-24 campaign. True, City didn't have both Rodri and Kevin De Bruyne, but on the whole, Arsenal frustrated City. They kept the game sluggish. City struggled to find any rhythm. It became weird to see a Pep Guardiola disciple playing such negative football. The XG from both teams of 0.9 was the lowest in the previous 4 meetings between the two, but that Gabriel Martinelli goal settled it. Arteta had beaten Pep. You could see it in his eyes.
You could sense, it's been so many years without beating them, and today we have beat, in my opinion, without a question of doubt, the best team in the world, and we've done it in a great way.
How he talked. It wasn't just relief of finally getting one over Pep. It was the opening he'd been looking for, to show Pep and the world that his Arsenal team could survive under pressure. The return leg at the Etihad followed a similar pattern, a snooze fest. A goalless draw where chances for either team were very few. On their part, the City players were frustrated. Arteta's plan was working. For the second successive season, he'd taken his Arsenal team into a title race with City, heading into the final stretch of the season. Except this time, this one went to the final day. And on the penultimate match day, Arteta was very hopeful. But in the end, it was false hope. Arsenal needed to win against Everton on the final day, which they did, but they also needed Man City to lose to West Ham at the Etihad. City won 3-1, finished top of the league, and 2 points clear of Arsenal. In that moment, Pep and Arteta knew. 2 contrasts in terms of the results, but 2 very similar outcomes. The gap between the 2 teams had become even smaller. Pep City had now done 4 in a row, 4 consecutive league titles, but Arteta made a promise to the Arsenal fans.
I think now it's time to have a break, think, reflect, and please keep pushing, keep inspiring this team. Don't be satisfied, because we want much more than that, and we're gonna get it.
His Arsenal team had gotten closer to winning the league title that would change everything. They would go again next season. Enter the 2024-25 campaign, the season that almost ended the friendship. Fireworks. The first meeting between the two was electric. Both knew what to expect. Pep knew Arteta would alter the game plan to catch him out. Arsenal would try to frustrate his team to get a result. What he didn't know was that they wanted to take this on a man-to-man basis. Within minutes of the start, Rodri became a target, warning shot. Arteta's later plan wasn't to just tactically go toe-to-toe with Pep, he wanted to go physical with him. Genius. It's something a lot of teams hadn't really figured out yet. Why? Because they weren't as bold against City to want to go toe-to-toe with his team. Even when City took the lead through Haaland, Arteta's men continued fighting. It got easier after Rodri got injured, an ACL injury that later altered the course of this rivalry. But in that moment, Arsenal sensed a result available for the taking. Goals from Calafiori and Gabriel had Arsenal in front. Then Arteta's other plan came to the forefront. Trossard got a red card. Arsenal frustrated City, but just when it looked like they'd done enough to get a result, in the 95th minute, City stole an equaliser, and the friendship was put to the ultimate test. It wasn't really about the goal, but what happened after. Post-match, Haaland told Arteta to stay humble. Post-match, City players like Bernardo Silva came out and spoke about how Arsenal came to defend and not play football. Post-match, Guardiola was incensed. He felt Arteta had come at him with a statement he more than anyone else knew would hit him deep.
Exactly what does it mean? What he said, he was here for years, and we know exactly what happened here. So because it can be related and in all the process now with 155 charges, maybe it's about that. He knows the information about that, maybe, or maybe had something like, I don't know, because really next time.
But Arteta tried to clear the air quickly.
First of all, because I love him, I respect him, and I admire him, and I admire his team and everything that he does. And this is a sport. One thing is our profession, this is our personal relationship.
This wasn't about City's 115 charges. He tried to keep it civil to save the relationship. Arteta talked about how much he loved Pep and how much he respected him, but deep down, he would have loved to get a result at the Etihad. The season progressed, and as it did, it became clearer with each passing week that Rodri's injury combined with City's poor form meant Pep's men were not going to defend their league title. They were fast slipping out of the title race, and almost in a poetic twist of fate, the man who confirmed this realization to Pep, his friend Mikel. Arsenal versus City at the Etihad. You would have been forgiven for thinking this would have been tight just like the previous matches had been. The only thing is, you'd have been wrong. Arsenal put out a statement. It was the perfect plan. They hit fast on the counter, dominated midfield, exposed a City backline that had been questionable all season. 5-1. Pep's heaviest defeat to Arsenal since he took over was inflicted by his friend. The result was the confirmation blow. Arteta on a playing surface was now at the same table Pep sat. He didn't just demand a seat, he took it. Pep didn't even get the opportunity to react. 5-1 was huge. In the context of everything, it was so huge. But for Arteta, it was bittersweet. The first season since he took over that he'd not lost to Pep's City team. A lot had been made about how if he and Arsenal could find a way to beat City, they'd win the league. They did beat City, but they didn't win the league. Liverpool did. Arsenal finished second for the third consecutive season. The silver lining? Arteta finished above Pep for the first time in his managerial career, and like that, we're in the present day. The two met again this season, but if not for the kits and the familiar faces in the dugout, it would have been almost impossible to tell this was Arsenal versus Manchester City. A Pep Guardiola-led team played defensive football against Arsenal. Pep understood. He'd seen the difference, the big factor. It wasn't that Pep was unable to adapt. If anything, the amount of league titles and successes he has had over the years is proof that he's been able to change his system season after season to get results. The difference is that where Pep adapted and kept his philosophy, Arteta was willing to completely change everything just to get a result. And that's why the game at the Emirates this season was an eye-opener. City sat back, countered, scored, then defended for large parts. It's what Arsenal and Arteta would have done 3 to 4 years ago. It's what Pep did now. He almost got away with it too, but Arsenal eventually found a way through Gabriel Martinelli deep into added time to level it 1-1. Stop to see what just happened. A familiar outcome in the Pep vs Arteta rivalry, only the roles got reversed. One team sat deep to defend after scoring, the other continued to push on to find an equaliser or a winner. But this season feels different. It finally feels like the year the student gets to beat the master. Arteta, as of recording this, has Arsenal top of the league and 6 points clear of City. If it does happen, if Arsenal wins the league, the friendship will have a new chapter. The greatest to ever do it versus the greatest on his way to doing it. As interesting as the rivalry between these two is, it doesn't quite beat the time Pep's Barcelona went head-to-head against the strongest English team of the 2000s. The Champions League final of 2009 was an epic for so many reasons, and you can find out why by clicking the next video.